The twin suns of Kepler 16 bits were setting on the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the small farming settlement nestled amidst rolling hills. In the humble abode of the Blackwood family, 7-year-old Timmy was helping his mother, Emily, prepare the evening meal. "Can I stir the pot, Mommy?" the young boy asked excitedly, his eyes shining with eagerness. Emily smiled and handed him the large wooden spoon. "Of course, dear, but be careful, it's hot." Timmy nodded solemnly and began stirring the fragrant stew, his little tongue poking out in concentration. Across the room, his father Nathan was seated at the table, reviewing some agricultural reports on his datapad. "How's the crop yield looking this quarter, dear?" Emily inquired, as she chopped fresh vegetables. "Better than expected, actually," Nathan replied. "With the new irrigation systems we installed, the wheat and corn harvests are up by almost 15%. "That's wonderful news," Emily exclaimed. "Maybe we can finally upgrade the old speeder this year." Timmy looked up from his stirring, a hopeful expression on his face. "Does that mean I can finally learn to drive it?" Nathan chuckled and ruffled his son's hair. "We'll see, sport. You're still a bit young yet." Just then, a loud rumbling sound echoed from outside, causing the family to pause and exchange puzzled glances. Timmy's eyes went wide. What was that? Before anyone could respond, the front door burst open and a panicked neighbor stumbled in. "The Imperials are here," he gasped, his face ashen. "They've landed ships in the town square." Nathan was on his feet in an instant, his expression grim. "Emily, take Timmy and hide in the basement. I'll go see what they want." "But Nathan," Emily protested, clutching Timmy's hand tightly. "No arguments," Nathan said firmly. "Get to safety. Now." With a fearful nod, Emily hurried Timmy down the narrow stairs to the basement cellar, the boy's small hand trembling in hers. Once they were safely inside, she barred the door and held Timmy close, her heart pounding. Upstairs, Nathan strode out onto the porch, squinting against the glare of powerful searchlights illuminating the town square. The contingent of imposing, armored figures were disembarking from the sleek, angular Imperial shuttles, their movements efficient and purposeful. Nathan swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising fear in his chest. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he called out, forcing his voice to remain steady. One of the figures, its features obscured by a reflective faceplate, turned towards him. "We're looking for a child," a mechanical voice intoned. "Male, approximately 7 years of age. You will bring him to us immediately." Nathan felt his blood run cold. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, buying time. "There are no children out here." The Imperial soldier took a step forward, its heavy boots thumping on the packed earth. "Do not lie to us, farmer. We have been tracking this child for some time. You will surrender him, or we will take him by force." Mustering his courage, Nathan stood his ground. "I don't know anything about a child you're after. Now, I must insist that you leave at once. This is a peaceful settlement, and we don't want any trouble." For a moment, the trooper seemed to consider his words. Then, with a curt nod, it turned and barked an order in a guttural language. Suddenly, the air was filled with the whine of repulsor lift engines as a squad of gleaming Imperial hover tanks emerged from the shadows, their main guns training on Nathan's humble home. "Last chance, farmer," the soldier intoned. "Bring out the child, or we will reduce your dwelling to rubble." Nathan's heart raced as he glanced back towards the basement door, behind which his family was hiding. He knew he had to stall for time, to give Emily and Timmy a chance to escape. Squaring his shoulders, he faced the impassive Imperial soldier once more. "I'm telling you, there is no child here. If you have a warrant, then I demand to see it. Otherwise, I'm ordering you to leave my property immediately." The soldier's response was swift and merciless. Before Nathan could react, a brilliant bolt of energy lanced out from one of the hover tanks, striking him square in the chest. The farmer crumpled to the ground, his last breath escaping in a strangled gasp. From the basement, Emily's anguished scream echoed through the settlement, mingling with the thunderous roar of the Imperial assault. How's this part 1 in third-person style? Please let me know if you'd like me to modify or expand on anything. The news of the Blackwood family's brutal murder at the hands of the Galactic Empire's soldiers spread like wildfire across the Earth's social media channels, igniting a firestorm of outrage and anguish. Within hours, the shocking footage captured by terrified onlookers had been viewed by millions, sparking vigils and protests in cities around the world. In the bustling metropolis of New York City, the United Nations headquarters was in a state of pandemonium as the Security Council convened an emergency meeting. Ambassadors from across the globe exchanged heated rhetoric, their faces etched with a mix of grief and righteous fury. This is an unacceptable act of barbarism, the representative from France thundered, slamming his fist on the table. The Galactic Empire must be held accountable for this atrocity. The Russian delegate nodded grimly. Agreed. This child's murder cannot go unanswered. We demand an immediate investigation and appropriate sanctions against the perpetrators. However, the ambassador from the Galactic Empire, a tall, imposing figure with a perpetual sneer, remained unmoved by the emotional pleas. The child was a known fugitive, wanted by the imperial authorities for crimes against the state, he drawled, his tone dripping with disdain. Our soldiers were simply carrying out their duty to maintain order and security within our territories. The room erupted in an outraged chorus of condemnation, with delegates from the United States, United Kingdom, and others vehemently refuting the Empire's claims. Amid the chaos, the UN Secretary-General, a seasoned diplomat from Kenya, raised his hands for silence. Enough, he said, his voice soft yet commanding. Clearly, we are dealing with a delicate and volatile situation here. We must approach this with utmost care and diplomacy, lest we risk further escalation. Turning to the Imperial Ambassador, he continued, however, the evidence we have seen is deeply disturbing. The brutal execution of an innocent child, in full view of the public, is an act that violates the most fundamental principles of human rights. I implore you, on behalf of the global community, to reconsider your position and work with us towards a peaceful resolution of this crisis. The imperial delegate's lips curled into a sardonic smile. Peaceful resolution. The Galactic Empire does not negotiate with terrorists or their sympathizers. This matter is closed. With that, he rose from his seat and strode out of the chamber, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The Secretary-General let out a weary sigh and turned to the other ambassadors. It seems diplomacy has failed. We must now consider our options, for the sake of justice and to prevent further tragedies. The representative from China spoke up, his expression grim. We cannot simply stand by and allow the empire to continue its reign of terror. Perhaps it is time we take more assertive action to defend our values and protect our people. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room as the ambassadors began discussing contingency plans and military strategies. The wheels of a global mobilization were now in motion, driven by a collective desire for retribution and the unwavering belief that the ruthless Galactic Empire must be brought to heel. Meanwhile, in the quiet suburbs of Chicago, Emily Blackwood sat on the edge of her bed, cradling a small framed photograph of her family. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she gazed at the smiling faces of Nathan and Timmy, a poignant reminder of the life that had been so cruelly taken from her. "I'm so sorry, my darling," she whispered, her voice breaking with anguish. "I couldn't protect you. But I promise, I will not rest until those responsible have been made to pay for their cruelty." Emily's hands tightened around the frame, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. The Empire had taken everything from her, her husband, her child, her very sense of security. But now, a fire had been ignited within her, one that would not be extinguished until she had exacted justice for their senseless murder. Little did she know that her thirst for vengeance would soon be echoed by millions across the planet, as Earth prepared to wage an unprecedented war against the tyrannical Galactic Empire. How's this part 2 in third-person style? Please let me know if you'd like me to modify or expand on anything. The news of the Blackwood family's brutal murder at the hands of the Galactic Empire had reverberated across the globe, igniting a tidal wave of outrage and a thirst for vengeance. In the halls of power, world leaders were grappling with how to respond to this horrific act of aggression. In the Oval Office of the White House, President Olivia Vance paced the floor, her brow furrowed in deep contemplation. The security briefing she had just received had painted a stark picture. The Galactic Empire, a sprawling interstellar hegemon, had shown itself to be utterly ruthless and uncompromising in its pursuit of power. "So you're telling me," Vance said, her piercing gaze fixed on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, "that diplomatic channels have been exhausted, and the Empire has made it clear they have no intention of holding themselves accountable for this atrocity." The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a seasoned 4-star general, nodded gravely. "That's correct, Madam President. Our ambassadors have been stonewalled at every turn, and the Empire has made it abundantly clear that they view us as little more than an insignificant backwater planet." Vance's jaw tightened, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of the resolute desk. "And what are our military options, then? What can we do to make them pay for the murder of that innocent child?" The general cleared his throat, his expression grim. "Well, Madam President, the truth is, we are vastly outmatched by the Galactic Empire's technological and military might. Their fleet of warships dwarfs anything we could currently field, and their soldiers are highly trained, well-equipped, and ruthlessly efficient." Vance's eyes narrowed. "But surely we can't just sit back and let them get away with this. There must be something we can do." Another general, this one from the Air Force, spoke up. "Actually, Madam President, we do have a plan. One that's audacious, risky, and quite frankly, unprecedented in human history." Vance's interest was piqued. "I'm listening." "We propose a massive coordinated shipbuilding campaign, one that would see the construction of a fleet of at least 700,000 battleships." The general explained, his voice tinged with a hint of excitement. "Utilizing our global manufacturing capabilities and the latest advancements in propulsion and weapons systems, we could potentially assemble a force capable of challenging the Empire's dominance." Vance's eyes widened in disbelief. 700,000 battleships. That's an inconceivable number. How on earth could we possibly pull that off? "It won't be easy, Madam President," the general acknowledged. "It will require an unprecedented level of international cooperation, resource mobilization, and technological innovation. But if we can pull it off, we believe we'll have a fighting chance of not just defending our home planet, but taking the fight to the Galactic Empire itself." Vance fell silent, her mind racing as she considered the implications of such a bold plan. The scale of the endeavor was staggering, the risks astronomical, but the thought of letting the Empire's heinous crime go unanswered was equally unacceptable. With a deep breath, she turned to the assembled military leaders. "All right then, let's do it." The generals exchanged surprised glances, clearly not having expected such a swift and decisive response. "Madam President, are you certain?" the chairman asked, his brow furrowed. "This will be an immense undertaking, one that could put a tremendous strain on our resources and economy." Vance straightened her shoulders, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "I am certain, General. The murder of that child has galvanized the entire planet. Our people are demanding justice, and I refuse to let them down. We will build this fleet, no matter the cost, and we will make the Galactic Empire pay for their cruelty." The generals exchanged solemn nods, the weight of the task ahead clearly etched on their faces. "Very well, Madam President. We'll get the ball rolling immediately." As the military leaders filed out of the Oval Office, Vance sank into her chair, a mixture of trepidation and resolve coursing through her veins. She knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, fraught with countless challenges and setbacks, but the memory of young Timmy's smiling face, snuffed out so callously by the Empire's soldiers, steeled her resolve. "Hold on, my dear," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the photograph of the Blackwood family that now sat on her desk. "Earth is coming for you. How's this part 3 in third-person style? Please let me know if you'd like me to modify or expand on anything." The announcement of Earth's unprecedented military buildup sent shockwaves through the far-flung worlds of the Galactic Empire. In the opulent throne room of the Imperial Palace, the aging Emperor Zeron listened to the grim report delivered by his top military advisors, his weathered face etched with a mix of disbelief and mounting concern. 700,000 battleships, you say? The Emperor rumbled, his voice a deep, resonant baritone. Surely this must be some kind of exaggeration. The humans on that insignificant little planet could never muster such a formidable force. One of the advisors, a grizzled fleet admiral, shook his head solemnly. "I'm afraid the reports are quite accurate, Your Majesty. Our intelligence network has been monitoring the situation closely, and the humans are mobilizing their entire industrial might towards this end." Emperor Zeron stroked his long, gray beard, his brow furrowing in deep thought. "And what is the status of our own forces in that sector? Can we not simply overwhelm them with our superior technology and numbers?" Another advisor, a thin-lipped Grand Moff, cleared his throat nervously. "That, unfortunately, is where the situation becomes rather complicated, Your Majesty. You see, the recent conflicts on the Outer Rim have left our forces in that region significantly depleted. We simply do not have the resources to mount a decisive preemptive strike against the human armada without compromising our hold on other critical systems." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his lips tightening into a thin line. "I see. So you are telling me that we are faced with the very real prospect of a full-scale war against these humans?" "I'm afraid so, Your Majesty," the Grand Moff replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And if their reports are accurate, we may be outmatched in terms of sheer firepower." The throne room fell silent, the atmosphere thick with tension. Emperor Zeron's gaze drifted towards the towering viewports, where the gleaming spires of the imperial capital stretched out to the horizon. For decades, the Galactic Empire had maintained a firm grip on the galaxy, crushing any who dared to challenge its authority. The thought of a backwater world like Earth mustering the audacity, let alone the capability, to wage war against the mighty imperial war machine was almost inconceivable. Yet, the evidence was undeniable. The humans were not only mobilizing, but they were doing so with a resolve and urgency that spoke of a deep, burning desire for vengeance. The Emperor's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming rhythmically on the arm of his ornate throne. "Very well," he growled, his voice cutting through the silence like a razor. "Summon the High Command. We must devise a strategy to crush this human uprising before it gains any further momentum." The advisors exchanged uneasy glances, but nodded in affirmation. "At once, Your Majesty," the Grand Moff replied, his voice tinged with a hint of trepidation. As the advisors filed out of the throne room, Emperor Zeron leaned back in his seat, his piercing gaze fixed on the distant horizon. A small, humorless smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "So, the humans wish to challenge the might of the Galactic Empire," he mused, his voice low and contemplative. "How intriguing." He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the cavernous chamber. "Very well, then. Let us see what these defenders of Earth are truly made of." Meanwhile, on the bustling streets of New York City, the air crackled with a palpable sense of urgency and determination. Across the globe, factories and shipyards had been transformed into hives of frenetic activity, as humanity mobilized its resources for the task at hand. In a sprawling complex on the outskirts of the city, engineers and technicians worked tirelessly, their faces etched with a mix of focus and grim resolve. Towering skeletal frames, the beginnings of colossal warships, rose up against the skyline, each one a tangible symbol of Earth's defiance against the tyrannical Galactic Empire. Amidst the organized chaos, a young woman named Isabel, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, barked orders to her team of workers, her eyes alight with a fierce determination. "Move those plasma conduits into position, quickly," she shouted, gesturing towards a group of technicians. "We need to have the primary reactor core installed by the end of the day, or we'll fall behind schedule." A burly engineer approached her, his face streaked with grime. "Ma'am, we're running low on the specialized alloy required for the hull plating. If we don't get a new shipment in the next 48 hours, we'll have to divert resources from other sections of the project." Isabel's brow furrowed, her mind racing to find a solution. "Damn it. All right, get on the horn to our suppliers and tell them this is a priority 1 requisition. I don't care what it takes. We need that alloy here yesterday." The engineer nodded and hurried off, leaving Isabel to survey the frenzied activity around her. She knew that the stakes were higher than they had ever been, not just for her team, but for the entire planet. Failure was not an option. The fate of humanity now rested on the shoulders of these dedicated men and women who were pouring their heart and soul into this colossal undertaking. Isabel clenched her fists, her resolve hardening with every passing moment. "We'll show those imperial bastards what we're made of," she muttered under her breath. "Earth will rise, and the Galactic Empire will tremble." News of Earth's colossal military buildup had spread through the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Empire, sparking a heated debate among the Imperial High Command. In the war room of the Imperial Palace, the holographic displays flickered with strategic data as the top military leaders argued vehemently over the appropriate course of action. "This human armada is nothing more than a hollow threat," sneered Grand Moff Tarkin, his thin lips curled in disdain. "Their primitive technology and limited resources will never be able to match the might of our fleets. We should simply crush them before they have a chance to pose a real challenge." Admiral Thrawn, a brilliant Chiss strategist, regarded Tarkin with a cool, measured gaze. "I would caution against underestimating our opponents, Grand Moff. These humans have shown an unexpected resolve, and their ability to mobilize their resources on such a scale is quite remarkable." Tarkin scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Remarkable or not, they are still nothing more than insects to be swatted. We should launch a preemptive strike and be done with it, and risk provoking a full-scale war across multiple fronts." General Veers interjected, his brow furrowed with concern. "Our forces are already stretched thin dealing with the Outer Rim insurgencies. We cannot afford to divert significant resources to this human problem, not without jeopardizing our hold on other critical systems." Thrawn stroked his chin, his crimson eyes narrowing in thought. "General Veers makes a fair point. A direct confrontation with the humans may prove costlier than we anticipate, both in terms of manpower and material. Perhaps a more measured approach would be prudent." Tarkin glared at the Chiss Admiral, his jaw tightening. "Measured approach. This is the Galactic Empire, Admiral, not some backwater militia. We do not cower in the face of threats. We crush them with the full might of our forces." The holographic display flickered, drawing the attention of the assembled officers. A senior intelligence analyst stepped forward, his expression grave. "Forgive the interruption, gentlemen, but we have received some disturbing reports from our operatives on the human homeworld." Thrawn inclined his head, his gaze steady. "Proceed, Lieutenant." The analyst cleared his throat nervously. "It appears the humans have been making significant progress in their shipbuilding efforts. Our latest estimates indicate they may be able to field a fleet of nearly 700,000 capital ships within the next few standard cycles." A stunned silence fell over the war room, the implications of this news weighing heavily on the minds of the gathered officers. Tarkin's face had gone pale, his knuckles white, as he gripped the edge of the table. "Impossible," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. "That kind of industrial capacity. It's unheard of. How could these primitives accomplish such a feat?" Thrawn's expression remained impassive, but a glimmer of fascination flickered in his crimson eyes. "Remarkable indeed. It would appear the humans have managed to overcome their technological and logistical limitations with remarkable speed and efficiency." General Veers cleared his throat, his brow furrowed with apprehension. "This changes the strategic calculus significantly. A force of that magnitude would be capable of challenging our control over entire sectors of the Outer Rim, not to mention the threat it poses to the core Imperial worlds. Tarkin's face twisted in a scowl, his eyes burning with a mixture of outrage and thinly veiled fear. We cannot allow this to happen. The Galactic Empire cannot be defied, not by these insignificant upstarts. The Emperor, who had been silent throughout the exchange, raised a weathered hand, commanding the room's attention. "Enough," he rumbled, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "It is clear that we are facing a more formidable challenge than we had anticipated. Grand Moff Tarkin, I want you to mobilize our forces in the Outer Rim, but do so with caution. We cannot afford to leave our flanks exposed." Tarkin's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "As you command, Your Majesty." Turning to Admiral Thrawn, the Emperor continued, "And you, Admiral, I want you to oversee the deployment of our remaining fleets. Devise a strategy to blunt the human offensive, but do not engage them directly unless absolutely necessary. We must buy time to reinforce our defenses." Thrawn inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "It will be done, Your Majesty." As the officers filed out of the war room, the Emperor leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in deep thought. The human threat had caught the Galactic Empire off guard, and the consequences of failure were unthinkable. He could not afford to underestimate these determined adversaries, not when the very future of his empire hung in the balance. "So, the humans wish to challenge our dominance," the Emperor murmured, his gaze fixed on the holographic display that now showed the Earth's rapidly expanding fleet. "Very well, then. Let us see how far their resolve will carry them." The skies above the Outer Rim territories crackled with the thunderous sound of battle as the massive human armada engaged the Galactic Empire's forces in a series of brutal confrontations. Sleek, angular Imperial warships unleashed devastating barrages of laser fire and missile salvos, their crews fighting with the discipline and precision honed by decades of dominance. But the human vessels, no longer mere freighters and transports, responded with a ferocity and tenacity that caught the experienced Imperial commanders off guard. Wave after wave of Earth's colossal battleships pounded relentlessly against the Imperial lines, their powerful plasma cannons and particle beam weapons carving gaping holes in the enemy's defenses. Aboard the flagship of the human fleet, Admiral Isabel Garrison surveyed the unfolding chaos with a mixture of grim determination and cautious optimism. Her fingers danced across the holographic displays, her keen eyes analyzing the ebb and flow of the engagement, searching for weaknesses in the Imperial strategy. "Status report," she barked, her voice calm and measured. "We've managed to breach the enemy's outer perimeter, Admiral," her executive officer replied, his brow furrowed with concentration. "However, their reinforcements continue to pour in from multiple vectors. At this rate, we may be forced to disengage within the next 2 standard hours." Isabel's jaw tightened, but she remained outwardly composed. "Unacceptable. We cannot afford to cede any more ground to the Empire. Order all battle groups to maintain their positions and press the attack. I want those Imperial bastards on the defensive, not us." The executive officer nodded, relaying the orders to the fleet's captains. Across the sprawling battlefield, Earth's vessels surged forward, their massive guns blazing with renewed vigor. The clash of warships intensified, the vacuum of space echoing with the thunderous roar of cannon fire and the agonized cries of the dying. On the Imperial command ship, Admiral Thrawn observed the unfolding engagement with a measured gaze, his crimson eyes narrowing in contemplation. The human tenacity had caught his forces off guard, their sheer firepower and numbers proving to be a formidable challenge. "They fight with an unwavering determination," he murmured, more to himself than to the officers around him, "a trait we have not encountered in our previous conflicts." One of the junior officers, his face pale with the strain of the battle, turned to Thrawn. "Sir, our losses are mounting rapidly. If we do not disengage soon, we risk being overrun by the human armada." Thrawn raised a hand, silencing the officer's protests. Patience, Lieutenant. The humans may have numbers on their side, but they lack the strategic depth and tactical flexibility of our forces. We must buy our time. Wait for the opportune moment to strike. The lieutenant's brow furrowed, but he nodded reluctantly, turning his attention back to the holographic displays. Thrawn, however, remained transfixed, his keen mind dissecting the flow of the battle, searching for the chink in the human's armor. Across the battlefield, the fighting continued unabated, with both sides refusing to yield. The human vessels, powered by a burning desire for vengeance, pressed their assault with unrelenting ferocity, while the Imperial forces, driven by the weight of their reputation and the fear of failure, fought with a disciplined tenacity that belied their numerical disadvantage. As the battle raged on, the space around the warring fleets became a chaotic maelstrom of energy beams, missile trails, and the shattered hulks of once mighty ships. The air crackled with the acrid stench of burning plasma, and the vacuum echoed with the anguished cries of the wounded and the dying. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the human forces continued to push forward, their resolve hardening with each hard-won victory. Isabel, her face etched with a mixture of triumph and exhaustion, watched as her battle groups methodically dismantled the Imperial defenses, inch by agonizing inch. "Keep it up, my friends," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the din of the battle. "We're breaking through, just a little further, and we'll have them on the run." In the Imperial command ship, Thrawn's lips curled into a small predatory smile. The time had come to unleash his trump card. "All units," he ordered, his voice calm and measured. "Commence Operation Nightfall." The tide of the battle had turned, much to the dismay of Admiral Isabel Garrison and the beleaguered human fleet. Just as their forces had pushed the Imperial Armada to the brink of collapse, a sudden and unexpected maneuver by Admiral Thrawn's forces had thrown the carefully orchestrated human offensive into disarray. From the holographic displays on the bridge of Isabel's flagship, a grim tableau unfolded. Vast swaths of the human battle fleet had been outmaneuvered and surrounded by the nimble Imperial warships, their weapons batteries rendered impotent by a sophisticated electronic warfare assault. "Reroute all available power to the shields and point defense systems," Isabel barked, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical situation. "We need to buy time for the rest of the fleet to regroup and mount a counteroffensive." Her executive officer's face was etched with trepidation. "It's no use, Admiral. The Imperial forces have us hemmed in from all sides. Our losses are mounting by the minute, and our ammunition stores are running dangerously low." Isabel's jaw tightened, but she refused to concede defeat. "Then we fight to the last ship, Lieutenant. The people of Earth are counting on us. We will not let them down." Across the battlefield, the human vessels fought with a desperate, unyielding fury, their crews pouring every ounce of their being into the defense of their homeworld. But the relentless assault by the Imperial forces, bolstered by their sophisticated tactics and superior technology, slowly but surely ground down the human defenses. In the command center of the Imperial flagship, Admiral Thrawn observed the unfolding events with a mixture of satisfaction and clinical detachment. His strategy of feigning retreat and luring the human armada into a carefully prepared trap had paid off handsomely, and now the once mighty human fleet was on the verge of collapse. "Admiral, our forces are ready to deliver the final blow," a subordinate reported, his voice tinged with a hint of eagerness. "Shall we commence the assault?" Thrawn raised a hand, his crimson eyes narrowing. "Not yet. Let the humans expend the last of their strength. Then, and only then, will we strike the decisive blow." The subordinate officer hesitated, confusion evident on his face. "But, sir, we have them on the ropes. Surely, it would be better to press the attack now, while they are weakened." Thrawn fixed the officer with a steely gaze, his expression unreadable. Sometimes, the most effective strategy is to let one's opponent exhaust themselves, only to deliver the final, crushing blow when they are at their most vulnerable. "Patience, Lieutenant. Victory will soon be ours." Reluctantly, The subordinate officer nodded and relayed Thrawn's orders back to the fleet. Across the battlefield, the human vessels continued their desperate, last-ditch efforts to break free from the Imperial noose, their gunners firing with a frenzied desperation that belied their increasingly dire situation. Aboard Isabel's flagship, the crew fought with a grim determination, their resolve hardening in the face of the relentless Imperial onslaught. But as the minutes ticked by, the human defenses began to crumble, one by one. Shields failed, ammunition ran dry, and the once mighty vessels succumbed to the withering barrage of the Imperial warships. Isabel watched in anguish as her fleet disintegrated around her, the holographic displays flickering with the ominous red icons that signified the loss of yet another battleship. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the edge of the command console, her teeth gritted in a silent scream of defiance. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the battle. "We were so close. How could we have failed?" In the darkened recesses of the command center, a single tear traced a glistening path down her cheek, a testament to the profound sense of loss and despair that threatened to overwhelm her. But even as the human forces neared the brink of annihilation, a small glimmer of hope remained. For in the depths of the Imperial flagship, Admiral Thrawn continued to observe the unfolding events, his lips curled in a faint predatory smile. "Now," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, "now, we strike." With a silent nod, the subordinate officer relayed the order, and the Imperial fleet surged forward, their guns blazing with renewed fury. The human vessels, their defenses shattered, and their will to fight all but extinguished, could do little more than await their inevitable destruction. As the devastating barrage tore through the human armada, Isabel closed her eyes, a single, anguished cry of defiance escaping her lips. "Earth, forgive us." The once mighty human armada, reduced to a scattering of battered and broken vessels, drifted helplessly in the void of space, its crews battered and demoralized. Admiral Isabel Garrison sat silently on the bridge of her flagship, her face etched with a mixture of grief, shame, and a lingering determination that refused to be extinguished. "All ships," she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of the defeat resting on her shoulders. "Prepare for a final, desperate assault. We may be beaten, but we will not surrender." Her executive officer stared at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and desperation. "Admiral, our forces are in no condition to mount any kind of offensive. We're lucky to have even a fraction of our original strength left. Attempting to take on the Imperial fleet again would be suicide." Isabel turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "Then it will be a suicide worth remembering, Lieutenant. The people of Earth are counting on us. We cannot, we will not, let them down." The lieutenant opened his mouth to protest, but the resolute expression on Isabel's face silenced him. With a resigned nod, he relayed the orders to the remaining captains, his heart heavy with the knowledge that their final stand would likely be their last. Across the battlefield, the Imperial fleet, led by the formidable Admiral Thrawn, observed the battered human vessels with a mixture of triumph and caution. Thrawn's crimson eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical displays, his mind racing to anticipate the humans' next move. "They are not broken, yet," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the command console. "Impressive, considering the severity of their defeat." One of his officers, a young lieutenant, approached him, his face etched with concern. "Sir, should we not finish them off now, while they are weak? Our forces have them outnumbered and outmatched." Thrawn raised a hand, silencing the lieutenant. "Patience, Lieutenant. The humans have surprised us time and time again. I would not underestimate them, even in their darkest hour." The lieutenant looked perplexed, but he nodded and returned to his station. Thrawn, meanwhile, continued to observe the human fleet, his gaze unwavering. He knew that the coming confrontation would be a critical moment, one that would likely determine the fate of the entire galaxy. Suddenly, the holographic displays flashed with a series of urgent alerts, drawing Thrawn's attention. A massive force, far larger than the battered human armada, had emerged from the outer rim, its weapon systems primed and ready for battle. "Report," Thrawn commanded, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. "Sir, the human reinforcements have arrived," one of his officers reported, his voice tinged with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Their fleet is nearly twice the size of the main force we engaged earlier." Thrawn's lips curled into a faint predatory smile. "Excellent. The game is afoot, then." On the bridge of Isabel's flagship, a renewed sense of hope had replaced the earlier despair. As the fresh human vessels surged forward, their guns blazing, the battered crews found a second wind, their spirits bolstered by the arrival of their reinforcements. "All ships, full power to forward shields and weapons," Isabel ordered, her voice ringing with a newfound determination. "We've come too far to surrender now. Let's show these Imperial bastards what we're made of." The human vessels, their weapons systems roaring to life, unleashed a devastating barrage upon the surprised Imperial fleet. Caught off guard by the sheer scale and ferocity of the human counterattack, the Imperial warships struggled to mount an effective defense, their once-vaunted tactics and firepower proving insufficient against the overwhelming force of the human onslaught. Thrawn, his brow furrowed in a rare display of concern, directed his officers to regroup and launch a coordinated counteroffensive. But the human vessels, driven by a burning desire for vengeance and the will to defend their homeworld, refused to be deterred, their crews fighting with a desperate, unrelenting fury. As the battle raged on, the balance of power shifted, with the human forces slowly but surely gaining the upper hand. Thrawn, his normally stoic demeanor cracking, ordered a full-scale retreat, his fleet battered and demoralized by the tenacity of their adversaries. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice laced with a hint of disbelief. "How could these humans have overcome our might?" On the bridge of Isabel's flagship, a cheer went up as the retreating Imperial vessels disappeared into the void, their tails firmly between their legs. The Admiral, her eyes shining with a mix of triumph and relief, turned to her crew, a smile spreading across her weary features. "We did it, my friends," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Earth has been avenged, and the Galactic Empire has been humbled. This is just the beginning. The dawn of a new era, one where humanity will stand tall among the stars." As the human fleet surged forward, its sights set on the distant Imperial capital, Isabel knew that their journey had only just begun. But for now, in the aftermath of this pivotal victory, she allowed herself a moment to savor the sweet taste of justice.